All right, so this is a quote, a tweet from Lee Fong of The Intercept. He said, now that everyone discusses recent criminal justice history, why isn't deindustrialization mentioned in tandem with the war on drugs? Next, he says, cities like Baltimore, Milwaukee, and Oakland provided high-paying union jobs for African Americans before trade industrial policies changed. And that's the crux of it, ladies and gentlemen. The fact of the matter is, whatever solution someone is going to propose to us absolutely must include addressing the deindustrialization of our communities. And you can't address that unless you address globalization and the manner in which we play capitalism. Which brings me to my guests tonight who have been patient. Thanks for being on hold for it feels like a long time. I'm bringing on the phone now Emily. Hang on, let me make sure I get the titles right, because I like to call people by the right. Okay, so it's Larry Website, aka Young Harrington, aka the name that shall not be mentioned on air, and Emily Robinson, both of DSA, Democratic Socialists of America. First of all, tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, I follow you, and I know probably a lot of my listeners probably follow you as well. But tell us about yourself and DSA.
Right. So I am a recent DSA recruit, actually, thanks to Larry. And I've only been involved for a couple months now, but I got into sort of left politics through Bernie Sanders, right? So, like, this is the first time, you get Bernie Sanders and you get this candidate who's for the first time talking about how capitalism is failing people. And, you grow up, in America or in American cultures overseas, and you kind of hear this, capitalism is the gold standard. This is what you get. And then for the first time to have someone like Bernie Sanders go, well, actually, there are better options out there. It was sort of like like an enlightenment moment, like a ding moment. And then, you get in, for me, it was through Twitter. I first found out about DSA through Larry, and I was just really, really impressed with the message that they had. We've seen a lot of focus, especially from the socialist left, on intersectionality. And, we just recently endorsed the movement for Black Lives, which, it's almost counter to this narrative of like, oh, well, socialists are like boring white guys, and we shouldn't listen to them because they're white dudes and they have no idea what they're talking about. But like, actually, the socialist left is super, super diverse. And I think that's, one of those underrated things that really drew me to the left political spectrum in general.
Okay. And now, if I'm not mistaken, and you don't have to disclose completely on air, but you're definitely, obviously, a millennial, right? Because even I'm a millennial, right? But
yeah.
You're pretty young. What age group are you in?
So I just turned 18.
Wow.
I start college as a freshman in 20 days, actually. So wow. I am at the back end of the millennials.
And the reason I bring that up is because listening to you talk online and listening to other people, I know Larry is young, and we're going to get him in here. I'm chatting with him on Twitter, trying to figure out how we can get him in on the conversation. But listening to you and to other people, and I'm finding out more and more that the younger generation is not only rejecting capitalism, but you guys are prepared for this, right? You guys are equipped with the knowledge, with the data, with the experiences, with the anecdotes, as well as the delivery to combat this. And in a lot of ways, I feel like it's the younger generation that's going to lead the charge. Tell me a little bit more about your evolution into what you've become, because in a lot of ways, at least on the social media realm, and then now joining up with DSA, you're emerging into a leading voice that can help lead this charge. Tell me more about that evolution.
Well, so one of the things, and it sounds a little vapid, like the, New York Times trend with piece millennials that like, oh, they spend all their time online. But I think that's a really valid and really important thing. Personally for me, I never would have found out that there was a world outside of like, your West Wing theme song politics if it hadn't been for, things like Twitter or Facebook. And so I think millennials in a generation just below my generation, we grew up as digital natives, and so we have sort of this, I guess this perspective that we are so much more used to different stories, right?
Yeah.
So like where our parents' generations would go out and play on this, like in the cul-de-sac or whatever, with just the kids that lived in their neighborhood, we go online and we play with people from like all over the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you get sort of like this, I hear about things that are happening in South Africa, or I hear about things that are happening in Beijing, and it opens your eyes up to a lot of the world that you wouldn't otherwise see.
Yeah.
And one of those things that it opens your eyes up to are the realities of, the political system that we have in America. And so, you get all this information about, what's happening like with blight in Detroit. Yeah. Or what's happening in California. And you start to be able to make your own choices about the politics that you subscribe to in a way that you really didn't before. And so Twitter provides this platform for people who otherwise wouldn't necessarily have the privilege or the economic backing to have a platform.
Absolutely.
And then suddenly you get like all these great left voices who are like shooting out 140 character bites that are, in a way life-changing. Like, oh my God, I never would have thought of politics in this way if it hadn't been for like this one stupid tweet.
Yeah. No, listen, it is so much more than what people actually give it credit for, because it has created a community that allows us to have that camaraderie and that interaction, the necessary interactions that allow us to create synergies. And I know that's kind of cliche, but that's really what it is. It's creating synergies where we can feed off of each other, and the ideas become bigger, and the speed with which we engage in those ideas and that information flows is moving at such a faster pace. Now, I just ran my mouth long enough to try to get Larry connected again. Larry, are you there? Oh man,
I'm here.
Oh, we got you. Larry website, ladies and gentlemen. If I had an applause track, I would drop it right there, but I don't have it tonight. Larry, I have been speaking with Emily, and the reason I brought both of you on is because you presented me, you talked to me a little bit earlier today about the fact that millennials are two things. One, rejecting capitalism, which is a big concept and a big conversation that probably requires at least a dissertation or two, right? But we're gonna give it a radio level treatment. That's number one. But then two, millennials are rejecting the Democratic Party in a lot of ways. Particularly in this election, we rejected Hillary Clinton and overwhelmingly have been going after Bernie Sanders. And I'm pulling up on my screen for people watching on YouTube that the Democratic Party primary voters under 30, compared to Obama in 2008, Bernie Sanders got 13 points more in about I should say about 20 states that Bernie Sanders outperformed Barack Obama in millennials under 30 years old. Talk to me a little bit more about that phenomenon that you've been seeing and how you feel that's connected to DSA.
Yeah, sure. Hey, Ben, it's good to talk to you again. If you look at the numbers, Bernie didn't just beat Obama's youth record, which was talked about very frequently. He demolished his record. And even if you were to look at a state like North Carolina, where we lost pretty badly, Bernie still took 72% of the youth vote. And if you look at Clinton's total vote number, she only got a total accumulation of under 10% of her votes came from young people, whereas for us, it accumulated a block of roughly 25%. And even when the going got rough for our campaign, after Pennsylvania and New York, you could see that things were not looking great. But still, young people showed up, and we rallied, and we won Indiana, and we won West Virginia, and then we took the fight to California, which didn't go the way that we wanted to, but, young people didn't stop fighting until the very end.
And not only did you guys not, I mean, technically I'm a millennial, but I'm at the very beginning of the millennial. Like I'm right there at the mark. And Emily, you're right there at the end, right? So we have a full generation on this show today. But so not only did millennials fight like hell, but the numbers, it really looks as though the future belongs to a more left-leaning politics, as well as an economic structure. Would like for one of you to speak to that. What is the future looking like economically in terms of ideology of the millennials?
Yeah, so I'll talk about it. There was a Harvard survey done a couple months ago that polled people under 30 and found that the majority of young people don't support capitalism, and that there's a significant percent that supports socialism, and then there's an in-between. And I think the work of groups like DSA is to pull that other, sliver our way and show them what the benefits of socialism and democratic socialism is, and that, especially for us, we know that democracy is about a lot more than just casting a vote. It's about direct action and constant organization and communication with everybody around us.
Yeah. Okay, so then let's drill down in that, right? Let's dig a little deeper, right? So we're moving to the left generationally, right? I think personally, to me, looking at Hillary Clinton, I think this is the last hurrah of the centrist DLC Democrat. And thank God, right? If we have to suffer through it for a couple of years, so be it. I believe it's signaling the end. It's like the death pangs of this centrist triangulating version of the Democratic Party. The millennial vote is showing us that it's shifting to the left. What does that look like in terms of policy, both domestic policy, economic policy, and even speak to the way that DSA is addressing it, racial policy and intersectionality? What does that actually look like?
You want me to start first, Sam?
Yeah, and then
go ahead.
Yeah, and then circle around.
Yeah, no worries. So, basically, DSA's main focus right now is racial justice and intersectionality. And I know a lot of people think that socialists don't center either of them, but that's what we center our strategy on. Just a few weeks ago, we endorsed the Movement for Black Lives platform, and that's going to be one of our key organizing. We're going to be organizing specifically around that. And we know that mass mobilization of working class people is going to include a lot of people of color, and we're not going to be able to build a viable, alternative or do entryism within the Democratic Party if we don't mobilize those bases. So for us, just DSA has historically had an older membership, but now we're averaging over 200 members a month, and our membership rate has quadrupled. So I think, the triangulation you were talking about and the Clintonism, we've lived this life our whole entire life, and it's just not that great. We know that we can do a lot better than this, and we deserve better than it, to be honest. The Obama years that they say are so great have been pretty shitty for young people. We've been in a great recession, ever since I finished high school. Employment rates aren't great for young people, and it's don't see anything really significantly improving. So establishing a really strong social welfare state, radical action on climate change, uniting an inter-left movement against Clinton's foreign policy. There's a lot of work we have to do, and I think everybody needs to realize that.
Jump in there, Emily, and talk about it from any perspective, whether it's the foreign policy changes that you would like to see, economic changes that you would like to see, and if you don't mind, speak also on the movement, in the intersectional portion of the movement.
Right. And so I think one of the really important things that we're starting to see now is that, young people in general are getting a more global worldview. And I know that kind of is redundant, but before it used to be a very American-centric worldview, especially with anti-war activists in the 2000s against the Iraq War. It was all about America's place in the world versus like humanity's place in the world.
Right.
And I think if you look at sort of like the leftward trend of not just American millennials, but millennials in general, like if you look over across the pond with Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, you sort of started to see not only like a social leftward trend, but also an economic one, which I think is really just like, you can't have, successful socialism if it's not global, right? So like if anyone is oppressed, everyone is oppressed. And I think that's sort of like one of the really exciting things that we're really starting to see this year. And it sort of reminds me of, I guess it was a couple weeks ago, how, Black Lives Matter UK shut down one of the major thoroughfares going into Heathrow Airport, which is like the busiest airport in the world. And so, to sort of start to see this international cooperation and this general sort of excitement about taking back, a political system, whether it's, national or global, that has really, for the most part, worked against us for the longest time. And I guess like in sort of the really optimistic sense, it's like you have, this really wonderful base of intersectional politics. It's a discussion that we're having everywhere now. And I think it's so critical that we continue to have that discussion. But if we also include, not just speaking about, gay lives and Black lives and Hispanic lives and immigrant lives, but also talking about the economic factors that play into why we have these systems of oppression. And I think, DSA is really, taking a great step in the right direction by saying, look, we can link these things. Black people can never have, the freedom and the justice that they deserve if they're still oppressed under a capitalist system. And, I think if you look at that globally as well, we can't have a world that, the world that we deserve, like Larry said, if we don't have, freedom from drone strikes in Syria, or if we don't have, free movement of people from, war-torn countries, war-torn because of American imperialism, right. Between Syria, Turkey, Europe. And I think, even if it's just a small step, like saying, all right, we stand with Black Lives Matter, I think it's the right step. And I think it's just so critical that we continue to make those steps.
Awesome. Listen, so we started late, and if with your permission, I'd like to go a little bit longer because I want to drill down and ask some questions that, one, I'm getting some questions from our audience, and then two, I want to just kind of play the devil's advocate and about socialism and the concept of rejecting capitalism. How does that sound? You guys have a few extra minutes?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right, great. Just let me know when you have to go. Let's do 5 to 10 more minutes. All right. So we'll do the questions from the audience first, and then we'll get into my questions. And you guys know I love you. So if it seems like I'm being an asshole, it's only because I want to flesh it out for people who may not know any better. But from the audience, from JP Rankin, he wants to know: do you plan to lead millennials from behind the screen and into the streets? What's the plan to get them from behind the internet, from behind Twitter, and into the streets?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tackle this. People are, DSA, our YDS chapters are very active with young people, and something that we never really planned for, and it's worth emphasizing. There's a second split of the millennials coming very soon that nobody's talking about, and that's Emily's generation, which is Gen Z. And something we've seen a huge upsurge of is high school students forming YDS chapters, so our youth branch, but people that are even much younger than me, so people that are 15, 16 years old that have 2 or 3 years of organizing in a, explicitly socialist organization. And they can't even vote yet, but they have just incredible amounts of workplace organizing and, inter-left organizing. that will go a long way in the future. And I can't even really remember what the question was. I just started rambling.
No, how do we get, and Emily, if you want to jump in on it, but there's a lot of questions here. I might want to give you a separate one. But the question was, what's the plan to get from behind the screens, in front of the screens, and in the streets rather? And for what I'm hearing is that it's kind of happening organically, even in the high school level, where clubs are organizing and people are actually organizing in person versus just online. Yeah. Okay, so let me jump to this next question here. This was a low-hanging fruit, maybe. Let me just ask this anyway. How can we protest capitalism when we use phones and products from capitalism? Who wants that one?
All right, I'll take this one.
Okay, go.
So I love this because I think it tends to conflate like socialism and Ludditism, which is like a wonderful world that like we wouldn't use any capitalist technology at all. Mm-hmm. But I think that mindset is totally the wrong mindset. Like, keep your iPhone, acknowledge that it's terrible that it was made by slave labor, and acknowledge all of the problematic issues involved in like exploiting labor to get these products, but use them for your advantage, right? So, like, use your phone, get out there, figure out where your local socialist group is, figure out where, like, get on Twitter, man, like, network on Twitter. That's the best place ever. You know, call your friends up, text them, right? It's like an after-school special, like, activism thing. Like, use what you have to your advantage, you know, acknowledge the issues that got them in your hands, like your phone, but, like, don't let sort of, like, these sticks in the mud get you down. Like, keep going.
So let me unpack that question a little
further.
I'll
jump in on this.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, so also, this plays into a very capitalist worldview, looking at it through this angle, because people ask the same question about poorer folks, you know, that why do you have an iPhone? And when they see someone at Walmart, but, you know, the iPhones aren't that expensive, and why don't the poor deserve the best? Why can't we have better things? You know, we can have these things, and it's just a lie that all of us can't have decent things, and that, you know, so many have to. If you were to look at rent compared to the price of an iPhone, you know, the iPhone isn't what's keeping someone down.
Right.
It's that they can buy access into things that really actually matter.
I'm sorry, did you say look at the price of rent compared to the price of the iPhone? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and things like healthcare, you know, the iPhone that costs $100 isn't what's keeping someone down, and it's not a bad economic choice on their part.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
it's for my age bracket, it's childcare. It's the sharecropping that experience where you go to work 40 hours a week just to hand it over to childcare providers. So, and then living expenses on top of that. But I want to unpack that question a little further, though, right? So, in that question is the premise that socialism is counter or is antithetical to a market system that produces technologies that we're using now. And so maybe we should give them a clearer definition of what we mean when we say socialism. Are we saying and more specifically, rejecting capitalism? Are we rejecting the organizing of labor and capital that produces these technologies and are we replacing it with something that could organize labor and capital so that we can produce similar technologies? Because if we're not going to do that, then we're advocating for a system that could not produce the very same technologies we're using to fight against that system. It becomes almost like a paradox. Who wants that?
Who wants me to? Yeah, I mean, I can jump in a little bit. So these are really big questions, right? And we're not even close to getting to those questions. And these are questions that ESA addresses at meetings. You know, we can have the big discussions about socialist realism versus futurism and all of these kinds of things. But in the meantime, we have to make some steps to climb that ladder a little bit. We're a long way away from completely overthrowing the system, and we're going to have to take little victories in the meantime. It's going to take maybe by the generation after this generation, we could completely overthrow the capitalist class and system. But we also have to have that futurism, what we actually want. And that's something that communicating to people, but also organizing for a better world. In the process, you learn about what you actually want.
Yeah. Okay. So
right,
actually,
and I think
go ahead, Em. Go ahead.
No, so I just think there's a lot of different. There are many branches of socialism, right? So there's like market socialism, which isn't really my favorite, but there are a variety of different branches of socialism and of ways that you can implement socialism, and not all of them are necessarily like as openly antithetical, like you said, to the creation or entrepreneurship, really. So you can still have a socialist society that praises entrepreneurship, but you can do it in a way that doesn't also praise or require exploitation.
Damn it! I wish I had an applause track. I've been talking about getting my applause track, but I want everyone in the audience right now to give Emily a hand, because that's the answer for me, right? And that undoes the premise of that question, which is the idea that you cannot organize for production through socialism, and it's only something that we can do through capitalism, which is 100% untrue. I have a couple of other pretty good questions from my audience. Go ahead, Larry. Sound like you were jumping.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's worth emphasizing how much money a lot of these, self-proclaimed entrepreneurs get from the government to do their kind of research, and then also how much technology they're taking straight from, government-funded research. So it's not like this is separated, a lot of what they're using is coming from publicly subsidized research. And then even further than that, if you were to look at the Scandinavian countries, if you're going to have exploitative systems, they funded a social security system and a retirement plan with, nationalized oil system, and now they can benefit from that. You can make it work both ways. Not that it needs to be exploitative, but you can also establish stronger social welfare systems that way.
Yeah, no, these are thank you for those responses. Those are good responses, and even your first response, Larry. I don't want us to kind of gloss over what you said originally, which is you have to take the victories that you can get now, and gradually move to the direction that you want to move, and not allow the challenge of economic theory. While we may not have the economic theory to be a direct challenge to capitalism now, that doesn't mean that we stop and stifle any progress towards a more progressive future. It's kind of like you're making good the perfect of the good the enemy of perfect. So let me ask a couple more questions, then I'm gonna let you guys get out of here, and I'm gonna do the same. So I have a question. I have two of my favorite questions so far are coming from a guy named Charles Manson in our chat room. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means anything, but it's worth mentioning. His first question was, do you really think that American electoral politics provides an environment conducive to anti-capitalist politics?
I'll tackle it. Sure, why not? I mean, does any electoral system, I just don't really buy that framework, Mass mobilization and organization. By organizing, you'll open up pockets to create that kind of space.
Okay.
But as I said before, it's going to take work to open those kinds of bubbles and those pockets to rip the party apart. And, we were talking about the generational shifts earlier. When you're looking at a state like New York, where Bernie Sanders is winning over 80%, or Michigan, 86%, Wisconsin in the 80s, the Democratic Party could be a socialist party just based on demographics and this shift alone. But at the same time, it's going to take a lot of work and organization, because obviously there's going to be a ton of pushback.
So you're rejecting the underlying the entire framework because electoral politics at its core is about organizing and numbers and the ability to organize to demand that kind of change. All right, I like that. Emily, did you have anything on that? Because I have another question here from Charles Manson.
Well, I just wanted to say real quick that I think like the view that we can only achieve change through electoral politics, I think is really limiting. Yeah. And so I think like leftists in general sort of need to let themselves out of this box that we can only get anything done by like winning the presidency. There are so many other routes, and one of those is labor organizing, which the DSA does wonders on. So like let go of this idea that like we need to win every office, find the other routes.
You know, I heard about.
And by
Italy.
can I jump in on this real fast?
Go ahead.
So I'm a labor organizer, and within labor organizing, you're really impacting lives in ways that elections can't even impact lives. So right now we're working for 15 in the union, and the union being the emphasis, but the 15 at the same time, and things like paid sick leave. We're making improvements for tens, hundreds of thousands of people's lives, and those are real wins outside of elections. And I think for leftists, just going into electoral politics, if you don't have the numbers and it's, you know, you're not really invested, it can be a trap. And mobilizing outside of electoral politics, you can still make big wins. And when you're getting those big wins, you're, you know, activating tens of thousands of people. And maybe out of those tens of thousands, maybe 1,000 will join DSA. And that 1,000, you know, who knows what they can do. But as I was saying, just the bubbles in the pockets outside of electoral politics can rip open, you know, things that weren't even imaginable.
Wow. I heard about you too. I heard about Emily and I heard about Larry, and you guys are not disappointing, man. Your reputations are being upheld on this show right here. So last question from Charles Manson. Again, it's a great question, so I have to give him a shout out on his name. Given the privileged position of even the American working class relative to the rest of the world, how can you sell socialism to the American public who benefit from third world labor? And I want to add to it, how can you actually sell it to them when it is going to inevitably cause a strain? So not just on the working class, right? But let's talk about the middle class, the upper middle class. Moving towards socialism not only exposes the reality that we are exploiting third world labor, but it also means that some of the luxuries and some of the structures that we are so comfortable with are going to be done away with. How can we convince the middle class and the working class to let go of the luxuries that come from third world labor that will inevitably hurt, cause us some pain, even if it's only temporary?
Yeah, I can jump in a little bit. So, you know, so for example, the CWA strikes that happened in the Northeast, it's not only national organizing, they do international organizing as well. So when they were threatening to move jobs overseas, CWA sent representatives to, I can't remember the country right now, but also to do organizing there. So not only did CWA win the strike here, they also won benefits. I think it's Indonesia, but you don't quote me on that. But they went there and, you know, they won benefits for Indonesian workers. So it's not, you know, it's more international organizing than just national organizing.
Okay.
Even SEIU does international organizing. It's not like, you know, we're just mobilizing people here and everybody else can, you know, do whatever. We're mobilizing the working class in other countries and making sure that, you know, we're not screwing their workers and vice versa here, and just being on the same page as labor in both countries. Yeah. So pushing back against ownership, no matter where it is in the globe.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
Emily,
and I
feel
think
like you have
this
something to say
idea of
there.
like the yeah. But to speak to this idea of like the third world luxuries, I think the people that actually, you know, benefit from the most from, exploited labor overseas are actually a really small segment of the population. So, most of this outsourced labor that could be brought back home wouldn't actually, up the price that drastically. Like, there was this really douchey article about a restaurant chain in Oregon that was, upping the price of, hamburgers or whatever, and they were including that because, they have to pay their employees a living wage. And it was like a cent, right? So it's like you've got a $50 meal and you're paying 1 cent extra. So, some woman can go home and like actually feed her kids. So I think like the marginal impact of like bringing non-exploitative labor home, I think isn't really as like earth-shattering as people want to believe it is. And I think like in the end, if we get rid of things like the kafala system in the Gulf states, or just general slave labor in India, not only will Americans and like working class Americans included benefit, but also like globally, things will get better.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually tweeting something out here. I'm saying I'm so impressed by Emily and Larry.
I'll jump in for something real fast.
Well, actually, no, I got to say let me say this. Larry, I put you in my tweet and I said, Larry is okay though. No, go ahead, Larry.
No, I think since we were talking about, the generational shift towards socialism, the labor market for young people is super isolating. And a reason that it's super isolating is because unions in America are super weak right now. And, you see the benefits of, you look at the benefits of what unions won people 30, 40 years ago when unions were stronger. We can win those same kind of fights if younger people, start to organize themselves. And, it's a just thing to do and it's the right thing to do. We don't learn a whole lot about the history of unions in our country and, what they've won and their role in improving the world and improving this nation.
Yeah.
And just activating people saying, unionizing in your workplace is not a bad thing. Yeah. And showing people how to do that is the right thing to do.
You know what? And both of you have hit on this. The answer to that last question, you both have kind of in a roundabout way hit on this. But I want to just bring it out a little bit clearer in this concept of America versus a third world exploitation and our luxuries. You both kind of hit on this. There still is the underlying force of global organizing. And you mentioned the SEIU, the international unions that do that global organizing. But I think we've seen historically a very intentional play by the elite to minimize that sense of international community. And even the premise of the question continues that nationalistic identity over an international identity. And as you said at the beginning, Emily, that socialism should be international in its best format. So I just want to throw that out there because I think that's something that you both were hinting at and kind of alluded to. But I just wanted to make sure to that question. We say that, we should look globally and not allow ourselves to be so nationalistic to the detriment of our own best interest at the end of the day. So, all right. So I'm going to let you both get the last word, however you want to give the last word. And then as you give the last word, tell us where we can find out more about the Democratic Socialists of America. And Larry, if you would, I want you to start only because I want you to explain that this is not, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is not a political party, but it's more of a social movement, organizing movement. Correct me if I'm wrong. Give us the last words and then tell us how to get up with DSA.
Yeah, and just to go back with exploitation, this is the reason why inter-left solidarity against, Clintonism and her militarism is such an important thing. There's a very economic part to what she's doing, and it benefits the ruling class. 100%. And a reason why it's important for us to stand up to paramilitarism is because it's exploitative. So, international solidarity is something that we definitely put to the forefront. But yeah, DSA is not a political party. We don't run candidates. There's talk within DSA to potentially, if we were to get powerful enough, as I was saying before, mobilizing millennials and the working class and people of color. If we can get big enough, then maybe we could become that force, but you don't want to stretch yourself too thin and really get invested in things that can burn people out. What was the rest of the question?
Tell us how to get more information on DSA and how we connect with all of you.
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about DSA, you can go to dsausa.org, and if you go to the Get Involved, there's a Join Us button. We have, you can join as a student, as a low-income person, or if you're super rich, you can you can help us fund socialism, because as the great Joe Schwartz says, you can't defeat capitalist trash without socialist cash. And if you wanted to reach out to me, I'm on Twitter at Larry Website. I'll DM with you and help you get situated within DSA, or if you need help, you can reach out to the Don Dada of DSA, the real McCoy, David Duhalby. He's our deputy director, and he's on Twitter at don't know. I don't want to screw it up.
Hang on, David.
At David Duhalby. He'll get in touch with you. We all start somewhere, and what we like to do is take people that come into our group, quiet people that aren't leaders, and turning every single member that we have into someone that's a leader and someone that can help lead the way, rather than a very, top-down approach. DSA is very decentralized, so everybody has a powerful voice within DSA.
Awesome. Emily, you get the last... go ahead, Larry.
I got to shout out Matt Brunick, Carl Bayer, shout out to Chapo Trap House. That's about all I got.
Yeah, okay, so that was, you broke up, but I heard you say Matt Brunick, Carl Bayer, and Chapo Trap House. Shout out to all of you guys. Love all their work. Emily, you get the last word. Matter of fact, you get the last word of the night. I'm not even saying anything else. So when you're done, I'm playing the closing music. What do you have to say?
All right, so no pressure then. So I will just stump a little bit for YDS. So we are the youth version of the DSA. You can find us at ydsusa.org. And I just want to sort of speak to the empowerment of young people getting involved with politics, right? So it's a life-changing thing, and, find the young people in your life and get them out there. It will change them for the better, and I know it's cheesy, but it's awesome. Get involved. And also find me on Twitter at C_M_play. It's like the Pink Floyd song. So come chat, and I'll help you out with finding your voice as a young person. Let's do this, guys. It'll be awesome.
Awesome. And I lied because I forgot to do something first. Okay, so before I do this, Larry, thank you. Emily, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys coming on. But before I sign off, I have to make sure I thank all of my sponsors and all of the people who support the show. So I'm not going to make you sit through that as a tacit endorsement of my show. Thank you guys so much, and love to talk to you more about this next time.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. All right, folks, that has been Emily Robinson and Larry. Larry Website.